Excellent. So, officially, good afternoon. My name is Adara Goldberg, and I'm the Executive Director of the Holocaust Resource Center, Human Rights Institute, and Diversity Council here at Kean University. It is our pleasure to be with all of you this evening for our important program with the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation. Momentarily, I'm going to turn things over to David Montblatt, who will be leading us through today's session and will introduce himself. But a few housekeeping points. There is a chat, as you've all been using, so we know that it works. I'm going to ask that during the program, if you have burning questions that you're afraid you're going to forget, please feel free to put them in there. But otherwise, we will have time at the end for Q&A. So everything will be addressed. We are recording today's event, so if you're not comfortable being on screen, obviously you can turn your camera off, but we do like to see your faces. It's a lot nicer than speaking to, an empty box. And one more item, just before I forget, does anybody know what November 15th is? Allison.
Sorry, and if I hope this is what you're getting at. It's the high school leadership conference, right?
It
With
is the high
Nadaba
school
Mandela.
leadership. That's right. So November 11th to 15th is Human Rights Week here at Kean University. And we are going to be having Nadaba Mandela, who is the grandson of Nelson Mandela, not the one who's been in the news lately, who will be here addressing his work with the Africa Rising Foundation around topics of food security, health disparities, and education through empowerment and empowerment through education. And so there'll be a number of events happening that week on campus. On the Thursday, there will be a distinguished lecture, part of our distinguished lecture series with Mr. Mandela that is held on the Kean campus. All of you are welcome to attend, and you are all eligible for free tickets, as Kean, affiliates. So if you're interested, we do encourage you to participate in that. And on Friday, we have our annual high school leadership conference. Nadaba Mandela will be the keynote speaker alongside Joe Nappy, who many of you know, and we have been fortunate to be working with, for upwards of a decade now. And he was, of course, the 2024 New Jersey Teacher of the Year, and a good friend to all of us. And so he will be there in partnership with Nadaba Mandela. The event is being presented both virtually and in person on the Kean campus, and there is no cost to any of you or your students. If this is something that you're interested in for your own class or for your colleagues, and you haven't received information, please reach out to us or your instructor if you're a student, and we will make sure to get that to you right away. We currently have about 900 students registered, and we are taking over Harwood Arena for this. So we're moving up in the world, away from Downs Hall and into Harwood. So we do hope to see some of you and your kiddos there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David to get us started.
Hi, everyone. I am David Montblatt. I'm the Curriculum Director for the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation, also known as JPEF. Today, it's my privilege and honor to present to you our new curriculum, Foundations of Resistance, which is a curriculum to counter anti-Semitism in grades 6 through 12. We will have, as was mentioned before, a Q&A session at the end. If you have anything urgent, feel free to type it into the chat. So Foundations of Resistance is a project of the California Teachers Collaborative for Holocaust and Genocide Education, established by the JFCS Holocaust Center with support from the California Department of Education, Marin County Office of Education, and the state of California. Members include the ADL, Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation, the USC Shoah Foundation, the Uyghur Genocide Online Resource Center, the Cambodian Genocide Education Resource Center, and many others. So without further ado, I'd like to get started. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see here. Okay. So I'd like to start off today by talking about anti-Semitism, which is the focus of this new curriculum. This is a page out of one of our teacher's guides, which we'll introduce to you in a little bit. In recent years, there has been a significant rise in anti-Semitism throughout the world, with people increasingly scapegoating Jews for the ills of society. Most notably, there's been a disturbing increase in anti-Semitism in the United States. A 2022 Anti-Defamation League study found that 85% of Americans believe at least one anti-Semitic trope about Jewish people, and 20% believe 6 or more anti-Semitic stereotypes. According to the FBI, there are more hate crimes against Jews than against all other religious groups combined. As a result, Jewish communities increasingly feel under assault. Jewish people report feeling anxious, losing sleep, hiding their Jewish identity, and avoiding Jewish spaces and gatherings. Anti-Semitism is generally defined as prejudice against or hatred of Jewish people, but perhaps it is more usefully understood as a conspiracy theory about how the world operates. Known as the longest hatred, anti-Semitism is based on centuries-old malicious lies and tropes. It is uniquely used as an umbrella explanation for all societal problems, suggesting that Jews are the clandestine operators of the world, acting for their own malevolent purposes and gain. Anti-Semitism reflects how society chooses to address its problems and challenges. Due to the all-encompassing nature of anti-Semitism, when people turn to conspiracy theories to explain the causes of society's problems, Jews are often the first group of people to become scapegoats. But scapegoating rarely ends with the Jewish people. For example, in recent years, the anti-Semitic Great Replacement conspiracy theory not only incited the white supremacist mass murder of Jews at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, but also the mass murder of Black Americans at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston and the supermarket in Buffalo, the mass murder of Latino and Hispanic immigrants at a store in El Paso, the mass murder of Muslims at the Al Noor Mosque in New Zealand. These events are examples of why anti-Semitism is frequently compared to the canary in the coal mine, as its escalation is often a harbinger of increased hostility and hate towards other communities. Anti-Semitism serves as a barometer of the health of society, a bellwether of hate crimes and extremism, and a marker for how human beings are treating one another. As every society faces problems and challenges, the scapegoating of Jews knows no boundaries. It festers in every country, regardless of whether its Jewish population is large, medium, small, or non-existent. It is beholden to no political party or affiliation. It can be found across the entire political spectrum, but more frequently towards the extremes. It is revealed often unwittingly in our workplaces, personal relationships, and by friends and family members. Anti-Semitism mutates, uniquely finding its path into every cultural medium. It courses through the internet and social media. It infects popular culture, music, sports, film, TV, and multiplayer gaming. It is propagated by religious institutions, government systems of news, colleges and universities. And now, most insidiously, anti-Semitism has become rampant in our schools. In the last decade, the number of anti-Semitic incidents, harassment, vandalism, and assault, for example, have increased over 900%, from 912 incidents in 2014 to nearly 8,900 incidents in 2023. More than one in 8 of these incidents occurred at schools. These figures included over 1,000 bomb threats in 2023 towards synagogues and other Jewish institutions, up from 91 the previous year. Since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, anti-Semitic incidents have risen by 361%. So, I'd like to introduce you to the new curriculum, Foundations of Resistance, a curriculum to counter anti-Semitism for grades 6 through 12, featuring 4 interactive web quests. This is our website, resist.jewishpartisans.org. We'll be sending this information to you so that you can use this in your own schools. Foundations of Resistance utilizes the history and life lessons of the Jewish partisans of World War II to teach students why and how to resist anti-Semitism. Foundations teaches students to act with increased empathy, to recognize and call out anti-Semitism, to build a positive leadership identity, and to resist anti-Semitism both systemically and in their everyday lives. Foundations of Resistance is a curriculum consisting of 4 classroom lessons for varying grade level ranges between 6th and 12th grade. The curriculum is versatile. Lessons can be taught individually, in tandem, in trios, or can be extended into a complete 4-lesson unit of study. Each Foundations lesson can be completed in a single classroom period, and each comes with a comprehensive teacher's guide, complete with curriculum details, lesson plan, resources, and other useful materials and information. Foundation of Resistance aligns with the California Department of Education's Common Core standards across social studies, English, and history, and is compatible with educational standards across all 50 states. Each Foundations lesson is centered on a unique web quest that can be accessed on a tablet, laptop, or desktop computer. A web quest is an online educational program in which students can make choices about which topics they wish to explore within a guided framework. Foundations web quests use interactive imagery, illustrations, and other multimedia combined with advanced organizers to immerse students in the topics of empathy, anti-Semitism, leadership, and resistance. I'm going to share with you some of the key curriculum objectives, and then we're going to dive right into one of our new lessons here. So all Foundations of Resistance lessons are based on Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives and utilize response-based assessment tools to evaluate student learning. Here are some of them. Discover the history of the Jewish partisans of World War II. Recognize the critical role of empathy in maintaining a healthy society. Explore ways to cultivate your empathy and increase your empathetic behavior. Recognize the harm anti-Semitic conspiracy theories cause to society. Reframe leadership as a set of activities in which anyone can participate. Use a leadership compass inspired by the partisans to develop your leadership identity. Investigate the history of anti-Semitism using an interactive timeline. Examine anti-Semitic tropes and their historical roots. Dismantle modern-day anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Examine how anti-Semitism is propagated by systems and institutions in society. Discover why anti-Semitism poses a threat to democracy, and learn to safely, effectively, lawfully, and fairly resist anti-Semitism and hate. So what we're going to do is begin with one of the 4 lessons in this curriculum called Understanding the Partisans. This is a lesson, and like all of them, they're 50 minutes long, so they can be completed in one classroom session. This is for grades 6 through 12, so it's fairly universal. The overview here, meet the Jewish partisans of World War II, transform your understanding of the Jewish experience during the Holocaust, and discover the paramount importance of empathy in a healthy society. Explore ways to cultivate your own empathy and increase your empathetic behavior. So as a quick overview of what you'll be seeing today, it's a little presentation order. We just talked about anti-Semitism and introduced the curriculum. We're going to be diving into understanding the partisans together, which again is one of the 4 lessons of this curriculum. Then we'll go a little bit into curriculum structure, and then we will have you try out the Knowing Anti-Semitism web quest, again, one of the 4 lessons. And then we'll have a conclusion and then take any questions that you may have. So I'm going to take it to one of the pages here. Let's see. Sorry, here it is. This is from the lesson plan, Understanding the Partisans, and we'll show you the lesson plan in full in a little bit. And this is the lesson procedure. So at the beginning of this lesson, you would be setting the tone. There's a section in our teacher's guide that explains and provides you with suggestions of how to set the proper tone when teaching the Holocaust. You'll have the word empathy written on the board, as such circled. You'll ask your students what comes to mind when you think about the word empathy. And as you field responses, you'll write them on the board as follows. You can do this on a whiteboard or chalkboard. Survey your class. Do you think empathy plays any role in your everyday decision-making? Raise your hand if you feel no, empathy does not play a role in your everyday decision-making. Okay, now raise your hand if yes, empathy does play a role in my everyday decision-making. You're going to say to the class, today we will be learning about the Jewish partisans of World War II. During the war, millions of Jewish people throughout Europe and the Soviet Union found themselves in unimaginable and dire circumstances. Hunted by the Nazis and their collaborators, thousands of Jews, many of whom were teenagers, through both chance and the will to live, managed to escape to forests and mountains to hide and survive. But instead of caring only for themselves and their own survival, they chose to fight back and save lives. So we're going to show you a short film from JPEF, produced by Mitch Braff, our organization's founder, called Introduction to the Jewish Partisans. It is 6 minutes and 56 seconds long, and afterwards we will go into the webquest section of the lesson. This is the film that you would present to your students.
These are the images that come to mind when people think about the Jewish experience during the Holocaust. But these are not the only images. There were 20,000 to 30,000 Jews who formed organized armed resistance groups all throughout Europe. These little-known freedom fighters conducted thousands of acts of sabotage against their Nazi oppressors. They were known as Jewish partisans.
People did not go only like sheep to their death. People were fighting every which way they can.
I did my job the best I could. I was in many battles with the Germans face to face. Sometimes maybe 100 feet away. And bullets were flying all sides. And luckily, I survived.
Let's say a German column was marching through us. He ambushed them.
The partisans, they fought for freedom, for a better tomorrow, for a better future. And they fought in order not to be eliminated by the Germans, against the Germans.
Jewish partisans were responsible for the liberation of thousands of Jews trapped in ghettos, saving them from annihilation.
I started to organize an escape. I had 55 people that they were willing to escape. From the 55, 30 were killed. 25 made it into the woods. Without the forest, we couldn't survive.
The trees, the sky, the pine needle ground were our summer home. The underground hut was our winter home. We're dealing with friendly and unfriendly peasants. The friendly peasants supported us with food and with ammunition. The unfriendly peasant had no choice. We would get in at night, pick up the prepared food orders that were prepared for the Germans, and leave receipts. The partisans were here.
The moon was our biggest enemy, because if there was a moon night, because in day we couldn't go, in the night. If there was a moonlight night, we could move. So the night, the blizzard, heavy snow, heavy rain, this was our friends.
Jewish partisans committed thousands of acts of sabotage, significantly impeding the Nazi war effort.
We were interested in getting involved in sabotage acts to interrupt and disrupt the communication and transportation to the front.
We attacked the depot. We hit the guard and got ammunition, and we blew up the train depot.
We could see the Germans there, and I could recognize the Germans that I wanted to kill, who killed my friend. And they started to shoot towards us, but when they shot all only from revolvers. They were not prepared, they didn't have rifles, they didn't have machine guns. We overpowered them, so that little by little their shooting stopped.
We had to blow up a train, and it was sitting in the background and waiting till the train approached, and some of the Germans got killed.
It's the same to Jews as it is to Americans to study the Revolutionary War and its heroes, right? People put their chest in front of English muskets to build a country. We put our chest in front of German muskets to defend ourselves from annihilation and maybe prevent the death of other Jews.
If I was going to get killed, I was going to get killed as a fighter. Not because I'm a Jew.
I survived for two legacies, for revenge and for telling the story. Revenge from my father and telling the story from my mother. So if I had the chance and if I looked for resistance, this was the most important thing for me. And I didn't care if I would be killed, if I wouldn't be killed. I had to do it.
There's such a thing as fighting back. This is the way I think. That's why I'm sitting here to give you the interview. Why else would I do it? I want the people to know that we were fighting.
This is the hymn of Jewish partisans.
Sog nicht keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, Himmel eine verstellen Bläuteig.
Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Schau, es wird abbeugt unser Brot mehr seinen do.
Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Schuh, es wird abbeugt unser Trott mehr seinen do. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gwore, unser Mut, gesingen mit Naganes in die Hand. Du sollt da Volk zwischen.
Okay. So that is the video that you would share with your students at the beginning of this lesson, Understanding the Partisans. It's also used in two of the other remaining 3 lessons in the curriculum. However, if you do use multiple lessons, you would only show it once, and that is explained in the teacher's guides. We're going to dive right back in to Understanding the Partisans. You've shown the film to your students, and now you're going to guide them to their individual laptop, desktop, or tablet to the beginning of this web quest, Understanding the Partisans. These web quests will take approximately 22 minutes to complete and are the center portion of each Foundations of Resistance lesson. At the end of the web quest, students will be working in small groups of 2 to 4 students in which they will review and discuss the responses they gave during the web quest. And you'll see how that is done quite shortly. So here's the first page of the web quest. We're going to go through it. We're going to go through it at an advanced pace so that we can get through everything we need to today. But here, Mira was one of the partisans in the film, and a quote from her: "Only by striving for a better understanding between peoples can we hope for peace." The first page of the web quest explains what a partisan is, and it goes on to introduce what they did during the war. We won't read through all of this right now to save time, and also because you just learned a little about the partisans in the film. But the final paragraph we will read: in this web quest, you will explore the role of empathy in maintaining a healthy society. You will choose a partisan, learn their story, and understand their motivations, interactions, and goals during the war. You will see how a teenager did enormous good for others in the face of unthinkable circumstances. And though you do not face challenges anything like those the partisans faced, you have the ability to positively impact the world by acting with empathy. And again, that is the focus of this lesson, empathy. That is one of our foundations of resistance, which we will review in full after this lesson. At the bottom of this page, students need to enter their name. They can enter their gender if they're comfortable sharing. They should enter their grade level, class subject, for example, history, the name of their school, the country, city. I'm entering this now so that we can advance. So Philly for short, enter the state. And this teacher's code here is a 5-digit alphanumeric code that you will provide to your students so that you can receive the responses at the end. I'm going to show you how that works at the end of this web quest. For now, we don't need to type it. So they start their web quest for understanding the partisans. Each page starts with a quotation that's relevant to the page itself and the questions asked. On the first page, they're going to choose a partisan, which you are going to have the opportunity to do right now. There are 4 partisans to choose for, and by the end of this year, we're going to have 6 separate web quests for students to choose from. We have Frank Bleichman. So we're going to list a few details about Frank, Gertie, Joe, and Sonia. I'm going to ask you to type in the chat which web quest you want to choose, and we'll go by majority. And that's the web quest we'll do together. So Frank, he had strict parents. He was a middle child, likes to bike ride. He was dating. Family owned a store. He had many siblings. Gertie, she loved to read. She was in a youth group, a good student, a picky eater, the eldest child from a religious family. And these are just some of the things about them before the war, so that students have maybe can establish an introductory connection and help them to select which web quest to go on. So Joe, his father in the business, he's in a youth group as well. One of 4 siblings, had a pet. He loved rugby. And he played an instrument. And finally, Sonia, or Buck, a picky eater, had a pet, played an instrument, close with her older brother, loved to read, youngest child. Okay, so 4 partisans to choose from. And I'm going to ask you to, there's no right or wrong answer here, of course, to select a partisan, and whoever is selected the most, that's the one we're going to do today together. So let's see here. Just answer, you're going to enter either Joe, Gertie, Sonia, or Frank. Got a lot of Gerties. Some Joes here. Wow, overflowing with Gertie. Maybe some of you know who Gertie Boyarsky was. I don't know. But for whatever reason, you've chosen it. That's very interesting. So, okay. We'll give 5 more seconds here, but it looks like we have an overwhelming majority for Gertie, and so that's the one we'll do today. Wow, okay. Let us minimize this part again. And we'll select Gertie. All right. Now that we've selected Gertie, we go down, and the pages end in this big question. We call it the big question because some of the pages have more minor questions, but they conclude with a big question. The responses that your students give to these big questions are collated onto a PDF that they can view at the end of their web quest. And then they can use that PDF for their small group discussion at the end. So this question, read Elie Wiesel's quote at the top of the page. What do you think he means by "we must see in every person a universe"? Here's the quote again. And it's an interesting question. I'll ask you. If you were your students, put yourself in the voice of your students, and perhaps type in the chat your answers to this question. And we won't do this again with every large question, but just as an example, we'll do it here. Read Elie Wiesel's quote. We just did that. What do you think he means by "we must see in every person a universe"? And I'll open that up to your responses as your students. So I don't know if, yeah, okay, here we go. Accept others' differences, that we're all connected, that we are different, recognize the humanity in others. Everyone is important. There's many. A universe is endless possibilities. Understand, oh, wow, these are great. There's much more to people than what you see on the outside. Obviously, I can't read all of these. I'm going to do my best to read a lot of them. There's so much more to people than what you see on the outside. Every person matters. Everyone has a lot to offer. Every person has the potential to reach their goals, and this should be encouraged by those around them. This is excellent responses. Thank you. We'll minimize here again. Go back to the web quest. Thank you for answering those questions. So you would type the answers obviously in this box. Hit next. And now we're introduced to Gertie. Move this here. And the quotations are really from a wide range of people who are experts in a variety of subject areas or leaders in their own way. And this is for all 4 web quests. And not just the 4 web quests within Understanding the Partisans, but all 4 larger web quests for the 4 different lessons. So you meet Gertie at the age of 19. Gertie became a member of the Jewish Partisans, risking her life to help defeat the Nazis during World War II. And we see a map of her hometown, an illustrated map. Click the icons on the illustration of Gertie's hometown to learn about her life before World War II and to answer the questions below. So again, each web quiz has some sort of interactivity with it to engage students and to help them learn more about the subject. So for example, here, this is her hometown of Debrecen, Poland. If we clicked on Gertie's house here on this plus sign, we learn a little bit about her family. Gertrude Boyarsky, we call her Gertie because many people did, was born in 1922 in Debrecen. She was the oldest of 4 children. Gertie's family was Jewish and she was brought up in a very religious household. She also had a large extended family of cousins, aunts, and uncles. Growing up, Gertie enjoyed reading and belonged to a youth group. So we learn about her life by clicking on these icons, and then those are necessary to answer these questions below. So you're learning about her life before the war, and you're establishing a connection with Gertie more than just the 6 characteristics described when you selected her. And in order to answer these questions again, you need to click on these different icons. Here's the town hall, the village of Debrecen. It talks about population, where it's near, the butcher shop that her family owned. So you have to put the information from these different sources together to answer these questions. So I'm just typing these fast so that, because these are required fields. And this is what I meant earlier by maybe more minor questions. It's not the large question at the end. And this one is focused on the subject of empathy. Why might listening to someone's story be an important activity? So what we're doing here is we're overlaying an exploration of empathy to learning about an individual, in this case, Gertie, to establish connection and to do all the wonderful things you talked about in the importance of seeing each person as a universe. This is a very well-known quotation. I would bet that many of you have already read this at some point. So I'm not going to read it now, but it is by Pastor Martin Niemöller. And just for time's sake, I'm going to push through. This talks about, okay, what happens now in Gertie's life? Well, what happened when Germany invades Poland and what happens to her family, her town, everyone she knows as a result. And her life, of course, it gets turned upside down. And she becomes trapped in a ghetto and found herself in imminent danger. So there's kind of like a cliffhanger here. How is she going to escape? Where would she go? How would she survive? These are rhetorical, would be answered on the next page. But here, do you think you would speak up for an innocent person if it was at great risk to yourself? Why or why not? There's no right or wrong answer here either. But it's, again, thinking about what level of importance do you place on the lives of others, and is it even, and it's a real question, so it really does confuse your thinking, which is something we always try to do. Well, if I'm going to risk my life, is that worth it? And maybe it's not. Maybe it depends on my own circumstances. There's no right or wrong answer here. But in thinking it through, we engage students more in the subject of empathy. Now on this page, we have a storyboard. Discover the partisans. This is the page that shows you how Gertie became a partisan. It is a storyboard, and it is comprised of photographs and illustrations by our artist Sean Doherty out of Seattle. So you click on these plus signs, and it begins the story of how Gertie becomes a partisan. Here, Gertie's mother told her 4 children to get out of bed and get dressed. They were going to escape. A guard was in their backyard, but when he moved to a different post at the center of town, the family decided to run. They hurried to an underground cellar, hiding for several hours before fleeing into the cornfields. That night, almost all the inhabitants of the ghetto, between 3,000 to 4,000 Jews, were murdered. Here's her family hiding in a cornfield. And it goes on to explain how she met up with the partisans and what her role became. Her story is brutal, but it's true. And it's presented in a way that won't be traumatizing, but also there are parts of her life that are so significant they could not be avoided in telling her story. For example, here, soon after another tragedy struck, a second attack on the family camp left Gertie's father, brother, and sister dead. Gertie knew one of the murderers, a young Polish man who had been her classmate. Gertie recalls, although I saw everybody dead in front of me, I pleaded for my life. But her former classmate said, "You're a Jew, you must die." He fired his machine gun at her and left her for dead. Gertie, who felt the rush of bullets coming at her, was astonished to realize that she hadn't been hit. "I'll never forget that night," she says. "It was a beautiful, beautiful night with white snow and a blue sky, and my life was black. Here I am, all alone in the woods. I didn't know where to go, how to go, but I started to go with the path in the snow, and I came to the family group. Eventually, she takes on more responsibilities, and this is a page in the storyboard that is an example of a Zemelanka, an underground bunker that many partisans who survived in the forest created and used to survive for shelter. And this is a 360-degree virtual Zemelanka. And by spinning it around and seeing what it was like, it helps you to answer some of the questions below, just as the whole storyboard does. We continue to scroll down. We learn more about Gertie. Here are the questions that must be answered based on what you learned in the storyboard. Here's those questions about the Zemelankas. Zemelankas. I'm just doing this because these are required fields. And again, taking it back to empathy, because we just went through a storyboard, we're now asking, recall a time when listening to the story or perspective of someone you didn't know made an impression on you. I won't have you field that one, but we will field one more before we finish. And now we get to see a mission, an actual partisan mission that Gertie went on using this interactive timeline feature. Use the timeline to explore a mission in which Gertie burned down a bridge used by German soldiers. And so here's the timeline feature. You click on these arrows to get through the story, the various sections of her story. And here are pictures of these various sections that you can click on. Some are illustrations, others are photographs. Questions are answered by utilizing that interactive timeline. And then a big one here. How does it feel when people show interest in you and try to understand your story or experiences? And then we see what happened finally to Gertie after the war. I'll never forget that night, she says. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful, beautiful night with white snow and a blue sky, and my life was black. Here I am all alone in the woods. I didn't know where to go, how to go. It talks about when the war ended, what happened to Gertie, how she met Sam, and they got married. Here's Gertie many years later giving this interview. Mitch Braff, our founder, created dozens of documentary videos of Jewish partisans and their stories, which can be found on our website at www.jewishpartisans.org. And these lessons and webquests, much of the information from them comes from those documentary films. Gertrude Boyarsky regularly talked to school audiences about her wartime experiences and felt that her talks were a way to honor her relatives. When your father and mother dies, you have a cemetery to go to. I have no cemetery to go to. When I go to speak in school, it's like I go to the cemetery. To me, it feels like I'm going to pay tribute to my loved ones. Gertrude Boyarsky passed away in 2012. What can you do to try to see the good in other people more often? So again, I'll ask you to put yourselves in the mind of your students and try to answer this question. And I'll read off some of the responses that you place in the chat. And then we'll move on to concluding this webquest and to the rest of the presentation. What can you do to try to see the good in other people more often? The curriculum does not make analogies to the Israeli hostages, but there are materials in the, I'm answering a question listed here, but there are materials in the JPEF website that talk about the difference between terrorists and freedom fighters, the difference between a partisan and a freedom fighter and a terrorist, largely the differences between who is targeted and what their objectives are. You can learn more about the Jewish partisans at www.jewishpartisans.org. So again, back to the question, listen and lead with empathy. We all have our own journeys, and that builds our perspective. Always be kind and considerate what someone else might be going through. Stop and think about what others might be going through. Actually listen to one another in all perspectives. Talk to people, hear their stories. Really listen to what others have to say. Okay, yes. So this is a very good example of what students might say in response to that question and what you have to say as well. Educate yourself about other cultures, make personal connections with people. Assume goodwill and find the good in yourself. Thank you for your responses. I'm sorry, I couldn't read all of them. You would type your response here as usual. And now the final page of the webquest. Empathy is patiently and sincerely seeing the world through the other person's eyes. It is not learned in school. It is cultivated over a lifetime. Albert Einstein. So here's a page about cultivating your empathy. It talks more about empathy to the students. I'll read this paragraph. I'll read some of this. Empathy is a vital element in diminishing bias and addressing systemic racism. When we strive to understand the experiences of Gertie, Sonia, Frank, or Joe, we identify with their humanity, recognizing them as unique individuals rather than adhering to collective stereotypes. Practice of empathy serves as a deterrent to monolithing, the inclination to perceive group members as possessing a singular identity. Empathy enables us to see people as distinct human beings. As a side note, we will be at some point in the next school year adding a glossary, so we will have linked terms throughout the webquests to make this more accessible to all ages. The partisans lived through a time bereft of common empathy, contributing to an atmosphere permissive to societal derangement and the horrors of the Holocaust. By understanding the experiences of the Jewish partisans, their motivations, interactions, and goals, we can cultivate our own empathy, help people feel more understood and less alone, and bring about a healthier, more just world. And the interactivity here is basically a slide format. You can help maintain a healthy society by growing your own empathy and modeling empathetic behavior. And you can use these arrows to get through 6 different behaviors to learn about. And the lesson concludes with a survey. And after the survey, there's just 8 questions here. You complete your web quest. And as I said earlier, here's where it takes you to your PDF. I entered my name earlier, and so therefore it says, congratulations, David. When you click on download a PDF, the student receives a customized PDF that they can read off their screen, or they can send to themselves, or they can even print out. Talks about empathy. And as I said earlier, shows the responses. Here we wrote gibberish to get through the lesson, to the 6 big questions at the bottom of the pages. And these will be the basis for their one-on-one discussion. All 4 web quests for all 4 lessons and with this PDF for discussion. They all have the same structure, which is what we're getting to now. So that is understanding the partisans. And I'd like to take you now to explain a little bit more about the structure of this curriculum. And then, as I said earlier, let me show you our itinerary here. We're going to have you try out a web quest on your own called Knowing Anti-Semitism. It'll probably take about 15 minutes. And then we will conclude and then go on to questions. So, curriculum structure. Whoops. Well, that's recorded. So now everyone will see my entire life's calendar, but that's quite, it's cool. Let's move on here. Window. Go. What's this? All right. Foundations of Resistance consists of 4 classroom lessons that utilize the extraordinary history of the Jewish partisans of World War II to inspire and empower students to resist anti-Semitism and hate. To accomplish this, the curriculum posits 4 perpetual goals as foundational to countering anti-Semitism. We're going to start with the first foundation we call choosing, creating a better society. Anti-Semitism reflects how society chooses to address societal problems. Promoting a society driven by goodwill, which was a buzzword someone used in the chat just before, leads to solving our collective challenges rather than scapegoating specific groups and communities. It is the will to do good that leads to choosing not to be a bystander. As Holocaust scholar Yehuda Bauer puts it, thou shalt not be a victim, thou shalt not be a perpetrator, but above all, thou shalt not be a bystander. The long-term fight against anti-Semitism must be focused on shaping the institutions and mechanisms of society that can drive and diminish anti-Semitic beliefs and behavior. While objectively neutral, these social constructs can be used to promote facts or falsehoods, empathy or narcissism, and objectivity or bias. These institutions and mechanisms of society that most influence our behavior and morality today include, but are not limited to, government, education, social media, entertainment, religious institutions, news, and multiplayer gaming. The development of these constructs will be influenced, shaped, and directed by tomorrow's leaders. By cultivating values-based leaders of goodwill, we can create positive social constructs that counter anti-Semitism, promoting an informed, caring, and just society. So that takes us to the second foundation, which is knowing. Creating a more informed society. Resisting anti-Semitism requires identifying anti-Semitism, which, as a side note, something you're going to try for yourself in the next webquest. Based on centuries-old malicious lies and tropes, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are uniquely used as umbrella explanations for societal problems, suggesting that the Jews are clandestine operators of the world, acting for their own malevolent purposes. This was also written about in the anti-Semitism section of the Teacher's Guide. And everything I'm reading to you now is available to you in all the Teacher's Guides as well. Gaining the ability to call out anti-Semitic conspiracy theories by identifying their origins is the next critical step in effectively countering anti-Semitism. By choosing to create a society that values knowledge and intellectual curiosity, we are more likely to succeed at distinguishing facts from falsehoods, avoiding our baser inclinations to scapegoat others. Our next foundation, we have choosing, knowing, and now we have understanding, creating a more caring society. When we strive to understand the experiences of others, we identify with their humanity, recognizing them as unique individuals rather than collective stereotypes. The Jewish Partisan, okay, so we read this at the conclusion of the last lesson, so I'm not going to read this part again. And then our fourth foundation, to counter anti-Semitism, is building, creating a more just society. Pro-social behavior includes helping, sharing, and volunteering and cooperation. However, these activities can have negative outcomes when they are rooted in biases. This is why knowing and understanding are essential prerequisites to positive social action. By choosing objectivity over personal belief, we are more likely to find effective and ethical solutions to our problems. Positive social action is objective and leads to building a more just society. So this is basically how the model, our curriculum model, how we have structured foundations of resistance at the higher level. And now we will go into, oh, there's one thing I didn't show you. I want to make sure I show you that. So, okay, here's where we left off. So again, here's the curriculum model that illustrates the four foundations that are the spine of the curriculum and the various spheres, I'll call them, that go into forming each of these foundations. And we believe these 4 foundations lead to creating a better society. But what I didn't show you before is, and perhaps this is obvious at this point, is how each of these translate into the 4 lessons of this curriculum. The first one, choosing leadership, knowing anti-Semitism, the one that we just went through, at least for the webquest, understanding the partisans, and the 4th lesson, building leadership. I don't know if I wanted to show you that more or just the cool animation, but it doesn't really matter. So moving forward, what we're going to do now is have you try a web quest on your own called Knowing Anti-Semitism. So I'm going to ask all of you in a separate window to open up your browser and type in resist.jewishpartisans.org. I'm going to write that in the chat. Resist. If you click on that link, it will take you to the website, and I'll ask you to, under webquests in the main menu, go to Knowing Anti-Semitism and hold there on the first page. Let me try to answer some of these questions while as you go there. Does the curriculum alert students to propaganda that is anti? Yes. Okay. Does this curriculum alert students to propaganda that is anti-Zionist in the media? Does it teach the true meaning of Zionism? Okay. The answer to that question is not yet. This curriculum began its formation prior to October 7th, and there is discrepancy between some organizations, between the ADL's definition of anti-Zionism and some other leading organizations. We're going through that right now, and we will be creating a portion of this curriculum about anti-Zionism, which will be inserted into the webquest you're about to try. So we'll send you more information about that as it gets created so that you can try it out when it gets launched. Hopefully that answers some of your question. I will not go down the path right now of talking about the subject of anti-Zionism because it will take us down a different path that we won't have time to go on right now. So that takes us to Knowing Anti-Semitism. So you should all be there now. What I'm going to ask you to do is take approximately 15 minutes. It's now 5:32. Why don't we say 5:45? I think you can do it in 13. Try to do the Knowing Anti-Semitism web quest on your own. Think about if you were your students, what answers you might give as you go through it. And when you reach the end, we will continue on with the conclusion of the program. But this is your opportunity to really test drive this new curriculum, which was released this fall. Thank you. So for any of you who are away and maybe just came back and you're thinking what's going on, we are on the Knowing Antisemitism webquest, which can be found using the link in the chat, resist.jewishpartisans.org. On the webquest link, go down to Knowing Antisemitism. You can find it there. I'm trying to get a sense of where everybody might be and if we need to continue on to 5:45 or if you have concluded this web quest already. Perhaps, okay, someone's still at the timeline. Okay, so that's near the beginning. More time. Okay. People need more time. No problem. That's okay. The timeline's the longest one, part of the web quest, by the way. So you got it. More time. No problem. Keep going. So a 2-minute warning. We'll finish this part in 2 minutes. You may have to zoom through a little bit more if you're not fully done. That's okay. You really got a taste of what the webquest is about. That's what is most important. And the pages are self-explanatory. I think they are. Okay. So wherever you are in the webquest, I'm sorry, but we do have to move forward. But hopefully you got a good sense of what is being offered. And when you do get to the final page of this webquest, Knowing Antisemitism, you will see a module in which students are given a modern day conspiracy theory, anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, and then they're given multiple choices as to what the origin of that might be, what the anti-Semitic trope is that stands as the origin of that theory. And so that they could say, what you're saying to me is clearly not true. It's based on this origin that dates back to this time. And so we thought that would be a good way to, now obviously there are more tropes, there's more to the history timeline, but we feel these were strong areas to concentrate in to give students the tools to be able to identify to a degree what is anti-Semitic and what is BS, what is an actual conspiracy theory, and what's true. And obviously, with more learning, the more informed our society becomes, the more intellectually curious we become. Hopefully, people will be able to distinguish between falsehoods and truth more frequently. Moving forward, I just want to leave you with this charge and turn it over for questions. So, a little bit more about the organization. The Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation, JPEF, has launched the Foundations of Resistance curriculum to combat the appalling resurgence of anti-Semitism in the United States and the world. Foundations has been developed with the California Teachers Collaborative on Holocaust and Genocide Education, led by the Jewish Family and Children's Services Holocaust Center of San Francisco. JPEF recognizes that anti-Semitism mutates and will adapt foundations in real time to support the thousands of teachers confronting this pernicious enemy. Foundations will reflect the latest research and best practices in the field, giving educators a powerful and innovative resource to combat anti-Semitism in their schools and communities. Education is our greatest weapon in the fight against anti-Semitism. JPEF is providing our country's most critical leaders, its teachers, with cutting-edge resources to fight the scourge of anti-Semitism where it matters the most in our schools. JPEF believes that teachers are the nation's front line against this threat and is here to support them. So it is up to you guys. You really are the front lines. I mean, you may not have signed up for that. And that's where you find yourselves. And that's what our organization believes. That's at the foundation of this curriculum. So I'll open it up to questions. And I know that I wanted to start it off with our host, Kean College.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much, David. That was fantastic. And for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Megan and I'm the academic specialist at the HRC. And I'm also a high school history teacher. And I was blown away by this. And I thought this was fantastic, especially the Knowing Anti-Semitism web quest that we just did. I actually want to try to work it into my own curriculum right now because we're going to be talking about the Inquisition, and I set aside a day to talk about the origins of anti-Semitism, and like, oh, this might be perfect for my high schoolers. So thank you so much. My first question for you before I take questions in the chat is to begin with the empathy lesson that you showed us to begin with. I was really inspired by this lesson. I start similar discussions about anti-racism and racism with the Reconstruction era, with the discussion of how do we see differences with one another and what do we think of when we think of hierarchies. And the starting off with empathy sounded really great. How did the organization choose to start there?
Thank you for your question. I'm really glad that you that you may consider using the curriculum. That sounds wonderful. So empathy, I mean, in the curriculum model, the understanding foundation is third, but that doesn't necessarily, it's still almost like the heart of the curriculum, right? That's why I wanted to start there for this presentation. And also it is the one that we feel is okay for grades 6 through 12. And it's the only one of the 4 lessons that we felt that was appropriate for. So that's why we started there for the presentation. Just in terms of that subject, we did a lot of research and a lot of pointers, a lot of indicators that anti-Semitism really required empathy education. And the idea that we can cultivate our own empathy is something that we felt we would like to promote because we found it to be foundational to the fight. The way we treat one another, right? How could, what's more foundational than that?
No, I think that's great. That's definitely what I try to take with each lesson with my students. One of the questions that I think this past webquest, the little activity that you had us do, answers it. But how does, Bev says, how does this dispel anti-Semitic myths, especially those tied to current events that exist today? And I think we saw it a little bit with some of the photography with people holding up anti-Semitic tropes, but could you expand upon that?
Yes, so actually, I think it's possible that question was asked just before starting this last webquest, because as I mentioned a few minutes back, the final page actually, the culmination of that webquest is where you put together what you learned about anti-Semitic tropes, and you hear modern day conspiracy theories, and then you associate them as a way of, taking away their credibility. And so I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. And then I noticed this from a few teachers, especially those who I think might teach younger than 6 through 8. I know that's the curriculum target along with high schoolers, but a lot of them asked, yes, they know that the lessons are for secondary, but is there any suggestions that they can use to modify the lessons for younger grades or, take bits and pieces? It seems that there's a few people on the chat who said that the reading level seems slightly advanced even for their 6th graders. Is there anything that you guys are developing and trying to bring down the reading level to include elementary school students?
Anyway, this is new and we're always open to making improvements and additions to the curriculum. And we have actually recently heard that that lesson in particular, maybe the reading level was somewhat advanced. So that's a change that we're looking at. Another thing we're looking at, but this might not be able to be done until the next school year, is a way in which you can select a grade level webquest, and then the webquest is modified for that particular grade level. That's something that we're looking into doing. For right now, if you, as a teacher, want to make one of these lessons available for your students, but it's not really cut out for that grade level, there are many ways that you can adapt the lessons, some of which are written in the teacher's guides. And by the way, all of this is free to the public. So when you log into the website, create a login, it's free. And the reason you do that is so that you get a teacher's code. And then, of course, you can use that code so that you can receive your students' feedback. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
No, it does. And like you had said that this was a fairly new curriculum. So it sounds that you guys are, taking in consideration that feedback.
Well, like many of you, we believe curriculum is a living, breathing organism. And, as soon as we stop attending to it, especially with something, a subject like this, where we know anti-Semitism mutates, then it dies on the vine. And we want to make sure it's current. And that's very important to us.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned that with Bev's question earlier too, in terms of anti-Zionism. So I think that's fantastic. I guess another thing that might be like an add-in or a suggestion is that someone had said, I teach a few multilingual students in their classroom. Can the webquest be translated into Spanish or any other languages?
I mean, yes, it could be translated into any language, conceivably. If the question is the organization, is JPEF currently working on that?
I would assume so. That's the question that they intended.
I mean, we currently don't have a project in which we're translating to other common languages like Spanish or French, for example, but it's something that we would like to do. Should we have popularity around this curriculum, should it be successful and impactful? And if it is, then that's something we would do. Until then, I guess, if you have one of those features that can change the language on your website, that would work, I guess.
I guess to double up on that, with the teacher login, is there a location that teachers can give feedback or, oh, I had this great class, they wanted to share some testimony that they, felt or emotions that moved them. Is there a feature that teachers can reach out to the organization?
I believe it's contact@jewishpartisans.org. Our website is on at the bottom of all the, or how to contact us is at the bottom of the homepage. And the homepage is resist.jewishpartisans.org. So yes, I think contact@jewishpartisans.org.
Yeah, I think everyone, aside from that, everyone really liked the format. It seems that everyone in general thought this worked really, really well for the secondary sources. How does this curriculum, someone had asked earlier, how does this curriculum compare to other organizations that are also discussing anti-Semitism? It seems to me that this was very interactive compared to a lot that require, teachers to print out materials for the classroom.
Look, I don't know every organization's anti-Semitism curriculum. I know quite a few of them, but certainly not all of them. So looking at some of the major ones, we provide those in the teacher's guides as resources to you. We're not the only people fighting anti-Semitism, and there are other approaches. We like our approach, but what is consistent between the various organizations is that we are all countering anti-Semitism as part of the White House's plan to counter anti-Semitism. So if you Google White House, just as I said, White House plan to counter anti-Semitism, it will take you to the government website, which is a very long PDF created in the Biden administration that explains all of the different ways the country is going to counter and attack anti-Semitism. And it happens to be that education, of course, is 1.1, and that's the that's the goal that all of these organizations are trying to align themselves with, so that we have a unified effort from a very high level.
Thank you. It looks like we're almost out of time, wrapping up at 6 o'clock. But I want to thank you for everyone who's present. If you guys want to put your thanks into the chat or any last minute thoughts. I know from the HRC, this was fantastic, and I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this, especially in understanding how I can apply this to my own classroom. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, David, to explain this curriculum to us.
This is quite a privilege for me to present this work to you. So many people worked on it, so many organizations, and we're proud to present it to you. And most importantly, we hope that it works. And if it doesn't, we want to, or we think it will, but if there's parts of it that need to be improved upon, that's what we want to do. So your feedback is really critical to us. And we hope to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone else for taking the time out of your day. I know everyone is super busy, and like I just got out of class with my high schoolers. So thank you so much for taking the time. The HRC will be posting the recording on YouTube very shortly. So thank you so much. And feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.